Pleasant afternoon to all. Before we begin today's proceedings, we wish to officially acknowledge Dr. Andrew Hunt, the Chairman of NIHERST Board of Governors, Ms. Sharon Babulal, Member of the NIHERST Board, and other members of the NIHERST Board of Governors, Mrs. Marley Lewis, President of NIHERST, representatives of the Ministry of Education, Dr. Ashril Webb, Chair of RAPTT, our keynote speaker, Ms. Krista Ali, Clinical Psychologist of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, our panelists, Dr. Makeda Green, Ms. Cindy Andrews, Mr. Garth Forsen, Mrs. Colette Cyrus Burnett, and Mr. Davon Hernandez. We also wish to acknowledge Ms. Lavan Superville, Acting Vice President, Science and Technology at NIHERST, Mrs. Laurette Hope McDonald, Manager of HR and Corporate Services, also at NIHERST, members of the NIHERST and RAPTT staff, principals, teachers, parents and guardians, students, stakeholders in mental health awareness. Good afternoon again. My name is Candace Hector, Manager of Marketing and Communications at NIHERST, and I will be your co-moderator here today. I am also joined by Mr. Darren Jack of the Communications Department of NIHERST. As we commemorate Mental Health Month, it is indeed our pleasure to be a part of such a milestone event whereby science, technology, and innovation merges with mental health awareness for the advancement of our youth. On behalf of NIHERST and RAPTT, we welcome you to our webinar, Our Youth. By being a part of this awareness session, you will certainly be provided with the necessary tools to better equip our youth. I wish to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone here today this afternoon for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. With this in mind, I'd like to introduce to you Governor Sharon Babulal of the NIHERST Board of Governors to give some welcome remarks. Ms. Babulal, a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a degree in psychology, is a performance-driven professional. She is currently a counselor and has opted to further her studies in psychology at the University of the Southern Caribbean at the master's level. Without further ado, let's bring to the virtual stage Governor Babulal.
Dr. Andrew Hunt, Chairman of the NIHERST Board of Governors, members of the NIHERST Board of Governors, Mrs. Marlene Lewis, President of NIHERST, representatives of the Ministry of Education, Dr. Ashril Webb, Chair of RAPTT, our panelists, Dr. Makeda Green, Ms. Cindy Andrews, Mr. Garth Forsen, Mrs. Colette Cyrus Burnett, Dr. Davon Hernandez, Ms. Ali, Ms. Lavan Superville, AG Vice President of Science and Technology of NIHERST, Mrs. Laurette Hope McDonald, Manager of HR and Corporate Services of NIHERST, members of staff of NIHERST and RAPTT, principals, teachers, parents and guardians, students, stakeholders in mental health awareness, good afternoon. On behalf of the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, it is a great privilege for me to extend a warm welcome to you all at today's webinar, How Are Youth?, which is geared towards promoting youth mental health awareness in our nation. Before further proceedings, allow me first to express my sincerest gratitude to the coordinators for such a timely event. Your invested dedication is evident both in its seamless execution and the expert minds that have been able to assemble here today. It is with great honor that I receive your attendance and expertise on subject matters that are so pertinent to the development of our future generation. As a national agency pursuant to the advancement of young people, it is vital that we, as well as our stakeholders, understand that the challenges that plague our future leaders are not limited to those of socioeconomic nature, but are multifaceted and have also extended psychologically. These challenges, although existing pre-pandemic, have in recent times grown in proportion. Such challenges can be linked to our students' time away from physical schooling, resulting in a lack of social and cultural interaction, which we are all aware are necessary soft skills to traverse through life. NIHERST is strongly committed to the adoption and the promotion of developmental initiatives tailored to the technical and personal enrichment of young minds. It is with this in mind that we have yet again partnered with the brilliant minds of RAPTT to construct an initiative that is specifically engineered to assist both our youth and those who care for them. Mental health issues act as cancer to youth achieving their fullest potential, and by not having a better understanding of such concerns, it often spreads malignantly. Sessions such as this to discuss workable solutions are crucial more than ever. It is even more important to appreciate that though we may not be able to eradicate the mental health challenges of the youth by overnight treatment, an accurate diagnosis of the symptoms in the early stages is the ultimate step to remedy. As such, the Institute, in partnership with RAPTT, has positioned ourselves to venture in on this rigorous but indeed rewarding expedition of youth mental health advocacy. And I challenge you, our teachers, parents, and all those responsible for the next generation to do the same. I thank you for your time, and I leave you with a quote from Arthur Fletcher: "The mind is a terrible thing to waste."
Thank you, Governor, for those warm welcome remarks. At this point, we now wish to introduce to you one of our key collaborators on this initiative, Dr. Astral Webb, the chair of the Women's Roundtable Action Platform. Dr. Webb is also the president of Healthy Kinder International LLC, which is based in Maryland, USA. Amongst many of her accolades, she's the Global Award-winning expert on health and wellness, a female icon, a nationally recognized community leader, and a human rights consultant for health and mental health rights in disparate communities. We welcome Dr. Astral Webb.
Thank you. A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. To the chairman and board of directors of NIHERST, President Marlene Lord Lewis of NIHERST, all of our special invited guests, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols are observed. On behalf of the Women's Roundtable Action Platform of Trinidad and Tobago, also known as RAPTT, we wish to welcome each and every one of you today and to thank you for participating in this very important virtual mental health summit during Mental Health Awareness Month. It is time to prioritize youth mental health. To the fantastic dynamic team at NIHERST, we wish to say thank you and express our gratitude for such a successful collaboration that has not only provided an extensive network for all of our Trinidad and Tobago families living across all countries, but also to strengthen our mission to mentor, educate, provide networking opportunities and access for women and girls of the diaspora. Today, we have been able to convene some of the greatest and brightest minds in the youth mental health space And I am certain that each and every one of us will learn some incredible things and information, tools, and better strategies so that we can adequately address the needs of our youth suffering today. Thank you, and may you enjoy the summit.
Thank you, Dr. Webb, for those remarks. An excellent message on behalf of RAP-TT. At this point in time, permit me to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Ms. Krista Ali of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Ali is a clinical psychologist attached to the Investigations and Interventions Unit of the Children's Authority. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology and master's degree in clinical psychology from the University of the West Indies. She is a practicing clinician for over 7 years in the field of child protection and child advocacy, and is trained in critical incident stress management and conducts trauma intervention with children and families across the nation. Ms. Ali is also a clinical advisor to the judiciary and forensic interviewer. We welcome Ms. Krista Ali.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me here today. At the Children's Authority, we are mandated to look after the care and protection of the children of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, under that umbrella, we're also looking at the mental health of the youth that we're seeing about. So today, what I would like to do is just talk a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing, not only during the pandemic, but what was presented before the pandemic, as we call it, pre-pandemic, and then the type of trends that we're seeing in mental health issues in children. So some of the things that we've been noticing with children is that there's been a severe exacerbation in any symptoms of children who might have been diagnosed pre-pandemic. Particularly, we're seeing an uptick in the symptoms that children are presenting with, particularly with mood disorders. So those children who might have been presenting with depression and things like that, we're seeing a severe uptick in that symptomology. In addition to that, we're also seeing an increase in children who present with anxiety disorders. So generalized anxiety, children who might have been presenting with panic attacks. Now, of course, during the pandemic, why we're seeing that is because children are very much aware of what's happening, right? With the younger ones, they might not be 100% clued in to all of the things that's going on. But, as they get older, they know what's going on. Their families might have been affected by COVID. They themselves might have been diagnosed with COVID. We're losing people all around us, and it's a very difficult time, right? So imagine for us as adults, it's been a very difficult period. The past few years has been very difficult. The level of instability that we've been having has been very hard for us to cope with. Sometimes we tend to forget about our children because, we tend to think, they don't really know what's going on. They don't really know what's happening, but that's very much not true. What we're seeing is that children are very much aware, and it has been affecting them at the same level that it's been affecting us as adults. So in terms of children presenting with what we call health anxiety, we've seen an uptick in that, where they're not only afraid of getting COVID, they are also afraid of dying from it, So that's definitely something that we've been seeing, a severe exacerbation in symptomology of children who might have been presenting with mood disorders and anxiety disorders before. Now, another thing that we've been noticing at the authority, because at the authority, we do provide mental health intervention to children of the nation, particularly those who have been affected by child abuse and trauma. What we're seeing is that there's a serious uptick in children presenting with self-harming behaviors, suicidal thoughts, and what we call suicidal ideation. So we've been having to do a lot of intervention in terms of risk assessment of these children presenting with suicidal thoughts and who might have had a history of suicide attempts and self-harming behaviors. So that definitely is one of the ways that we're seeing that the pandemic and all of the things surrounding the pandemic has been affecting our youth. This is really, really something that we have to take into consideration, because what we really want is for our children to be mentally well. The opposite, of mental illness is mental wellness. And this is the path that we want for our children. This is what we want for all of the youth. So I'm very happy to see initiatives such as these, where we're coming together to discuss all of the relevant information and how do we not only deal with that information, but how are we going to put it into practice to help the youth and help the children in our nation? So I'm very happy to be part of, this type of discussions. So in terms of what we're doing here, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this is going to be put into practice and what, we're going to come up with in terms of how are we going to be assisting our children moving forward from here. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the youth of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Ms. Ali. Truly appreciated. And you were also able to provide a significant amount of context, and particularly as it relates to youth and the ongoing pandemic. So thank you so much for your contributions. And how important is it at this juncture to also hear directly from our youth on this topic? So with this in mind, let's cue this impactful clip from Ms. Cindy Andrews.
How are youth doing? Life is unpredictable and overwhelming. Every day, youth navigate the demands of school, family, and social life in an ever-changing world with a pandemic, climate change and global warming, crime, violence, and poverty. Each youth may respond to their environment and its challenges differently, but do you stop to check and see how youth are doing? It is said that the youth is the future, but how is our care and development in the present? Often, our mental and emotional care and well-being is overlooked if there isn't a physical explanation for why we may be feeling unwell. It seems that they do not care to hear about it or pay attention to the way our mental health affects our well-being. The youth are often told that we are being lazy when we may be burnt out or experiencing fatigue, chastised for lack of productivity when we may be experiencing performance anxiety, described as disrespectful or rude when we do not comply, and punished when we have challenges regulating and expressing our feelings of stress and anxiousness and frustration. Youth are exposed to so much information on social media and in real time, bombarded with doom and gloom or ideas that our weight, health, image, and lives need to look and be perfect. Youth fear missing out, succumb to peer pressure and bullying, or isolate ourselves. We face the pressures to achieve and accomplish. Let's stop, pause, reflect. Today, take a moment to check in on youth. How can you help youth with our mental health? Consider, how is life affecting us? Start by listening. Ask how youth are feeling. Ask, what is youth thinking?
What an amazing and praising contribution, Cindy. Thank you so much. And we can't wait for you to share a little bit more further in today's discussion. Our intent as both NIHERST and RAPTT is to provide great insight on such a broad topic that we all need to better understand. We now wish to introduce our panelists who would further elaborate on today's topics. We just would like to ensure that you do know that you have the option of including your questions in the chat or by utilizing the raise hand icon, and you can unmute your mic to share your point of view or ask a question at that point. So before we advance, let's introduce our first panel, which will focus on the overall mental health impact on youth. Today we have three panelists, first being Ms. Cindy Andrews, no stranger to mental health advocacy. She's a student, poet, writer, and an advocate who is committed to increasing youth representation and engagement in solution building for issues of youth inclusion, education reform, mental health care, access to social services, and youth in governance and leadership. She has a passion for mental health care and currently trains to advance a career as a clinical psychologist, pursuing her MSc in clinical psychology at UWI-Mona. Cindy is trained and certified in youth mental health, first aid, and peer counseling, and champions the inclusion of understanding the influence of Caribbean culture on our attitudes, behaviors, and experiences with mental health care and wellness. Our next panelist is Dr. Makeda Green, a Trinidadian-born clinical psychologist who holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in school psychology, a Master's of Arts degree in Global Gender Studies, and a Bachelor's degree in Psychology and Global Gender Studies. As a bilingual Spanish-speaking clinician, she has worked in the traditional school districts, public charter school system, and juvenile justice systems, with her primary focus on infants and toddlers, Spanish-speaking students, and Black immigrant students and families in several states in the United States. Our third and final panelist would be Mr. Davon Hernandez. He is the CEO of the Future Focus Empowerment Institute International. He works tirelessly with his team to engage, educate, and empower young men and women globally. He's an advertising and marketing strategist, a motivational speaker, a youth mental health first aid worker, a mental health advocate, and an empowerment coach. Mr. Hernandez is also an award-winning performer and dancer with 2 honors from the World Dance Sport Federation in England. He is the executive producer of the youth-centric talk show, Future Focus Fridays. He is dedicated to changing the world, one youth at a time, and is currently working on authoring and releasing his book debut. We now invite Ms. Andrews, who will lead on the topic, the overall impact on youth. Ms. Andrews.
Wow, I did not realize my mic was not unmuted. So good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to share in this space with so many people that are passionate about youth and mental health. So let me tell you a story. There was once 2 children who were best friends. Let's call them Michael and Rachel. They excelled at school in both academics and extracurricular activities. So they participated in sports, clubs, and even found time to attend social events. And then the pandemic happened. They transitioned to online school at home, and by this time they were in 4th form. Their parents thought that it was important for them to maximize this time being at home and encourage them to complete all of their CSEC examination subjects during this year. This meant that they spent even longer hours at school, followed by online exam preparatory classes and then timed exams at home. So from doing this, both their parents realized that they would have reached a percentage of consistently attaining 90 to 95%. But their parents still wanted to push them to reach 97 because they wanted them to be the top students nationally. Now, the students didn't complain. They continued because they understood that their parents wanted them to be the best. And sometimes to be the best, you don't take breaks, you keep pushing yourself, you keep pushing yourself, you keep pushing yourself. But then there were some changes with the pandemic. They had to go back to face-to-face school. And one of the first exams that they did upon returning to face-to-face schooling, they got an 87 and an 89 in chemistry. Now, this was one of the first times that they had ever not performed at the competencies that their parents had identified for them. Now, Michael, he was disappointed. And he was so disappointed by what happened, he had an outburst. He got extremely angry. He threw his textbooks across the hall. He started cursing. He even broke the door handle. Rachel, however, she became extremely quiet. She began to withdraw and she stopped speaking. She spent the rest of the day quiet, not saying anything to anyone, And these behaviors continued throughout the week. The teacher noticed this and scheduled a meeting with both their parents. Now, when Michael's mother heard about what happened, she said, "But what are they behaving so for? Are they children? Are they have no worries? Are they have no problems? So what is the reason for this?" Now, as Caribbean people, this is something we may have heard either directly or indirectly at least once in our lives. In the Caribbean, our cultures, our norms, and our beliefs often affect our perception of mental health and mental illness. We have a rich history of shared experiences that shapes the way we view the world and the way we interact with each other. We are described as resilient people for our ability to persevere. However, as we continue to push through and build our capacity, we tend to overlook how we may feel in the moment, or check in with ourselves, check in with youth, and most importantly, check in with our mental health. As parents, teachers, supporters, colleagues, you hope to have the best interests at heart for youth. You want us to achieve. You want us to excel, to be great. And while each stage of success for any milestone in life has challenges and rewards, our capacity for withstanding and overcoming any obstacle is supported by our mental health and well-being. Though we may look physically capable, it is equally important for you to focus on how we may be thinking, feeling, and processing the information and environment. And I know it sounds like a very complex thing to do, but one of the simplest steps is to stop, check in, and ask, how are youth doing? When we think about the terms mental health and mental illness, we tend to use them interchangeably, which often causes problems. Because when we think about mental health, we think about the overall state of an individual. How are they doing emotionally? How is their emotional well-being? How are they feeling? But when we consider mental illness, this specifically deals with having a diagnosed condition which affects the thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. Now, because of the fact that we use this interchangeably, it contributes to the stigma and discrimination that exists towards people who may experience mental health issues. This often makes it difficult for persons to speak up when they feel unwell without a physical explanation, prevent or discourage them from accessing healthcare, or cause them to hide how they are feeling. Now you might ask, why is it important for us to know how our youth doing? Well, the consequences of failing to address adolescent mental health conditions are not simply encouraging and teaching adolescents how to regulate their emotions or feel comfortable seeking mental health care, means that these behaviors, these things that affect them, can progress into adulthood. And if this happens, it can affect both their physical and mental health, often limiting their opportunities to live full, holistic lives. So you might ask, how can we help youth? Well, you're doing it right now by attending this conference, this webinar. But also, we need to continue to stop, reflect, and check in. Listen and care about the answer when you ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Let's create stable and nurturing environments where youth can honestly and openly share how they feel and what they think. Let's improve communities through the implementation of violence prevention programs, as we have been doing. Let's continue to empower community and youth groups to have training like we have been able to have in youth mental first aid, so that they can provide some support and care for their peers. And most importantly, let's continue to offer and raise awareness about mental health intervention and programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And we will go a bit more in depth with the entire panel shortly. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. Makeda Green, and she will be sharing on early childhood education. Dr. Green.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to actually share my screen because I feel as if we need to, what better way to discuss mental well-being and children than to show the greatest organ alive in the human body, right? Which is the brain. and go forward to looking at how we're looking at early childhood learners and primary school age children, which are essentially all in the same. And we're sitting here, and what we see here is basically an overview of what the brain, how the brain functions developmentally. And when we're looking at primary age children, we're looking at seeing how they're able to categorize objects, encourage problem solving, what they're learning in school, their socio-emotional development, what they're surrounding themselves with, both in family, school, community, and home settings, how they're able to talk to you, sing to you, read to you, engage, share, listen, respond. And we understand that the mental well-being of that is very important, right? So we're looking at the overall understanding, and in practice and in my own practice and in clinically, we look at all settings, family setting, community setting, and home setting. All of these settings can look different within each child, right? Because there are different social determinants that affect and impact every family and every individual that comes across into schools, and how that then determines how they're able to sort and categorize objects, how they're able to talk to you, sing to you, respond to you. Are they even awake on a morning to even remember what you have just said in the classroom? And all of these parts of the brain are impacted and developed to create that holistic child and what we're understanding in depth. And so in the picture, we have the different capabilities of the brain as it relates to the cognitive abilities and everyday functioning. And although each lobe is important, we want to focus on the different areas that will affect the brain in regard to the child. And we're seeing here that we want to focus more on, let's say, some of the social determinants with school absenteeism. So within the pandemic, we noticed that that this has been a huge ordeal, especially in the States, and I'm sure across globally, where children were home. They were at home and they had to work from home, learn from home. Everyone was at home. When school started to return to in-person setting or having that hybrid setting, we noticed that there was some hesitation with some parents or in some families with regard to sending their kids to school. Was it safe? Was it not safe? And also there was a difference in the family dynamic. Some parents were affected by COVID. Some family settings were different because of the impact that COVID had on their families. So that then in turn impacted the way in which that child was responding to their settings and also responding at school as well. So when we look at this, we're seeing that if a child is having some difficulties at home or in their community, for example, if parents are affected by COVID, whether they were extremely sick by it, they had to be hospitalized, or in fact, unfortunately, they were not able to make it, we can see that when they get to school, they're unable to sort, categorize, create problem solving, display their problem solving skills, notice patterns, help sing, share, and listen and respond, and all the things that we know that our primary school age children love to do. They're not able to do that because there's so many other determinants that are affecting what's happening. Their frontal lobe is impacted. They're thinking about other things, right? They're thinking about who's going to pick me up from school. Is there food at home? Is my dad going to be okay? Is my grandma going to be out of the hospital soon? These are the things that are impacting them. So we understand that the brain is not going to be able to understand or listen to what's happening at school if what's happening at home or in the community is impacted. Same in turn as in school. If some of their peers are not at school because maybe they're also dealing with things at home, so then that creates that that social functioning, right? We're seeing that brainstem, those emotional and physical well-beings that create ways for children to be safe are then inhibited. We see that there is that understanding that we are seeing that there's an impact on their empathy, their self-awareness, their self-management, because now they're not seeing their friends at school. They're not seeing some of their teachers at school. Everyone's wearing a mask. What's happening? And so we see that these are the different areas that can affect as well. When we're looking at the brainstem, we're looking at balance and coordination, maybe even their breathing, heart rate, and temperature, because we all know that this is all a part, right? Mental health is also as equivalent, if not important, if not as equally important as physical health. So I love showing this. This is actually an MRI that that I have been a part of, and so it looks at the comparison of a healthy brain as opposed to a brain that has been extremely neglected. And we're seeing that there are some results of chronic absences. We're looking at absenteeism, attendance, all of these things that have impacted students and families during COVID can result in some type of experiences within their brainstem. We're seeing that this is what's happening with regard to the exposure of the child's ability to learn. A vibrant child, a child that is exposed to learning, socio-emotional wellness, family wellness. Everyone is the quote unquote the normalcy that children are that experience day to day within the pandemic or within just an overall adverse child experience can impact their ability to create a normal, healthy brain, if you will, or seeing that those are some of the reasons why they're unable to maybe even navigate during different social situations, be able to self-regulate, behave in seeing differences in their behaviors, whether at recess or during playtime or within different peer-to-peer interactions. Maybe in clinical world, we normally see that as fight or flight syndrome, whether they're going to flee from a situation, stay there and fight it, or maybe just freeze. And then then we're seeing how this is impacting the brain to fully grow, especially for our primary aged children. So this is another my vocab my brain just went a little bit lax. This is another slide showing the differences within the stressors. So whether we are tiny humans, primary age children, adults, teenagers, adolescents, young adults, college age, we all deal with some kind of stress. And stress is a part of every day. We have the positive stress, which is, with primary age kids, what time does Sesame Street come on? What time does recess happen? When do I get to see my friends? What time is mom going to pick me up for my soccer practice? Those are positive stresses, right? Because those allow for the everyday. They're challenges, they're great things that are happening. We look forward to those things. We look forward to those events. Then we have those tolerable stresses. The tolerable stresses are, my gosh, I have, my science fair that's coming up. I have to prepare that project. I have my my poetry slam that's happening. I have to have my poetry together. I have to talk to my teacher after school, or I have to attend after school tutoring. That's tolerable stress. We know that we have to do that. It's an expectation. We have homework. We have all of these things that are expected of us, and we're able to tolerate it. That then goes into that frontal lobe. We have our family, we have our teachers to help us organize, plan, create that day-to-day understanding of what's happening in our everyday lives. Then we have the toxic stress and the negative stress. And these are some of the stressors that we have seen exacerbate and show some different displays within our youth within the most recent years, with the COVID pandemic, and just with a lot of different social determinants that are incurred. And we see that there's toxic stress and negative stress. So toxic stress can be attributed to differences in the family dynamics. So maybe there's a different family composition that has happened or occurred. We also have the negative stress that has occurred from the toxic stress, or the toxic stress that has then snowballed into the negative stress, or vice versa. And we see that these stressors are then impacting their ability to fully present every day within their everyday lives. So for example, if a child has a different family composition that was there in 2008 2019, but it's different now in 2021 due to different ailments from COVID, or maybe there's a different dynamic with job loss. Maybe parents have to take on extra jobs. So there's a difference in the level, difference in how much care that's being happened in the household. Maybe there's a different shift. Maybe mom is not home as much, but dad is home more. So then the family structure then changes, right? Because then we have that dad is different. Dad has a different structure than mom after school. There's a difference in way maybe grandma is the one picking up kids from school. So that kids are not used to that. Maybe they're used to seeing their mom every day or their dad every day. Or maybe their siblings have to now step up. So older siblings that maybe that were able to have more leisure time, or maybe more time to go to chess or go to swim practice, or maybe do tutoring after school. Now they have to take on an extra job to then help with their younger siblings or help with the household bills. Or maybe now they have to take on the responsibility of taking their siblings to school. Maybe the community has been impacted. The community has changed in a lot of ways, which is changing the composition of what that child is used to within their everyday lives. All of these things are incurred within our toxic stress and our negative stress, right? They can create that. Now, however, these compositions and these different dynamics that are happening can be tolerable. However, if the composition is not, if we have to be able to come together, and if that is unable to happen, then that's what creates the toxic stress and the negative stress. All of these stressors can be tolerable. However, with the dynamics that are happening and everyone is, and it's happening at the same time, we have to also remember that as adults too, we are also trying to navigate it. If we are trying to navigate it for ourselves, then we have to then that has to be transferred back to our families. We haven't had that time. And that's how these negative stressors and these toxic stressors then exacerbate and then transcend and transfer or project onto our little ones. So this is probably one of the most favorite part of this of my talk is just looking at the different developmental abilities, right? So we love to see how the brain is then able to function in different ways. And this is similar to what we saw in the first slide. However, with this one, this just shows a little bit more of the academic, this just takes on from the academic instruction and the teacher perspective. So I do work with schools, so I like to make sure that all of my conversation is not just for just clinical and just rote, it's for everyone, right? So these are for my educators, for my teachers, for my professors that are working with students. And so we see that these are the different ways that the brain is developing and understanding. And we see that the frontal lobe is what we see, what tends, and also the cerebellum is what tends to be the more impacted, because the frontal lobe holds that behavior control, that holds that emotion and personality, it holds the judgment, it holds the problem solving skill. On top of the frontal lobe is that prefrontal cortex, and that prefrontal cortex is more so developed during the adolescence into late adolescence time, and up to 22 years. However, we see with the frontal lobe, starting with more with this conversation with our primate age kids, is where we see the most impact. We're seeing how that is then being detailed and understood. And we're seeing that these brain development is then focused more into the academics with the parietal lobe, the memory that they're then needed, the memory that is needed, or that attentional control that is needed to then power the learning is in the temporal lobe, the language, the word recognition, and then the ability to see, visualize, and identify, which is in the back, which is in the back of the brain, which is the occipital lobe. And then that little tiny area, that stem that's hanging out is looking at our emotionals and how socio-emotional, how we are feeling safe, physically safe and emotionally safe on a day-to-day basis. And just being able to continuously build, and again, just as our lovely Miss Cindy N. Andrews had said, to just check in. How are you? How is everything doing? Recreate, right? So we have to recreate and redevelop how we are checking in with our youth, how we are checking in with ourselves, really, and creating that coordination and that socio-emotional wellness that is a part of our everyday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. We can't wait to sort of delve into your part or your topic in a little while. Yes, excellent presentation. So we're going to move on to Mr. Davon Hernandez, and he will be discussing the impact on young professionals. Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone, and it's a privilege and an honor to be here at How Are Youth. We're promoting mental health awareness because this is Mental Awareness Month. So today I'll be speaking a little bit about the mental well-being of young professionals, especially when it pertains to the educational impact on learning in the educational environment and also the work environment. So I'll just start with a quote quickly by Emily McDowell. It's all about finding yourself. Like everybody talks about finding yourself and who am I and all of that. She says, finding yourself is not really how it works. You aren't a $10 bill in last winter's coat pocket. You are also not lost. Your true self is right there, buried under cultural conditioning, other people's opinions, and inaccurate conclusions you drew as a kid or a child that became your beliefs about who you are. Finding yourself is actually returning to yourself and unlearning and excavation, remembering who you were before the world got their hands on you. And specifically, especially for young professionals, we find ourselves in this position all the time, like, who am I? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to do for work? What do I want to study for school? And it's always all about this kind of self-discovery or understanding of self. And most oftentimes it's just because of the things we've learned before. Somebody mentioned that we've all been through trauma in some way. It would be different, but we've all been through some at some point. We become adults with unresolved issues sometimes. So we talk about self-discovery quickly, understanding self, burnout, creating healthy boundaries, self-care, and time management. So I was talking to the president of Future Focus, Ms. Crystal Camijo, and in our conversation, she was saying, sometimes as young adults or young professionals, I don't think we understand the connection we have with people and the things that we actually want to do in life sometimes. She said we need to have a direct connection with ourselves so we can know who we are and what we want to do and what we don't want to do. And the things that are a priority would not take a backseat to the things that are not as important. She said also, as young professionals, we tend to jump at everything because we are at a place of uncertainty, and then we recognize that we are unhappy or not fulfilled enough, and then depression comes in and the thoughts of anxiety surface. I believe if we don't understand ourselves, it becomes contributors to anxieties and stress in most youth and young professionals. We are doing it for the money, she said, and not because we love it. We are doing the job that we are being paid for and not the calling that we were made for. And I like that. She said, as they say, we are making the bacon. Every day we go to work, or some people say we're hustling, you know, we have to make the money. But then we come home and we're unhappy, we're uncomfortable, we're burned out, as I explained before. And we feel lost, we feel confused. And because the time that we should be spending being creative or doing the things we are passionate about is spent at a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. And not knocking people who have jobs because we need jobs. So we can't knock that. But at the end of the day, some of us settle a lot, especially young professionals, we settle. I know that for a fact. And it's like, so what's going to pay the bill and what's going to do this? But we forget our passion, so we put it in the backseat because we need to fix things now or do things now or have a job to pay bills. And that could create burnout. Quickly, we know burnout is a state of emotion, physical and mental exhaustion, and it's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet demands, whether it's on work or whether it's in studies. So in terms of talking about self-discovery and understanding self, if we understand what we want to do, and especially when I say what you want to do, not what your parents want you to do, or your educators want you to do, or your peers or your colleagues, but something you want to do, something you're passionate about. And I know sometimes even when you study, You go into a field or you study into the field that makes money, not something that you want to do. Or you study into a field where your parents say this might be good for you. Or the typical ones, the traditional ones, a doctor, lawyer, teacher, the typical, and we don't go into the ones that we want because our parents might be proud enough or somebody might be disappointed in our choices. But we need to understand that we need to do that for ourselves and what we're passionate about, because eventually, as I just explained, it will create burnout. It will create more stress and anxiety and depression. It's important also for us as youth and anybody else and young professionals to create healthy boundaries with yourself, with your family, with friends, with colleagues, with peers, everyone, basically. Because when you create healthy boundaries, you create a space for yourself that you know for sure that it will be healthy and, as the topic described, good for your well-being. Too much times, I think for young professionals, we're good at saying yes and we're horrible at saying no. Our no's are almost non-existent. Somebody says something or they ask, you want to do this, you want to do that? And the first thing, yeah, let's do that. But you don't want to. And we're really horrible at saying no. And no doesn't mean it's disrespectful. No doesn't mean that you don't want to be or go with this individual or do something like that. But it just means that, no, maybe not this time, or it could take different forms. Like maybe not today, or maybe this is not for me, or maybe another time. But we need to make our no's as healthy as our yeses for specific things in order to create healthy boundaries. And again, healthy boundaries doesn't have to be with an individual that's not related. It's with everyone, including self. Another thing is self-care, which is really important as well. It could take different forms, as I just explained, and self-care doesn't have to be spa days or movies or eating. It could be anything. Once it creates a space for you that you can reflect, rejuvenate, and refuel, because sometimes we drain, our energy is gone, and from burnout, it's important to take care of yourself. So it could take different forms as well. It's important to create routines, whether it's morning routines, evening routines, and night. Simple things. If I know a lot of people struggle with anxieties, especially our young people, and depression. Sometimes even waking up is an issue, it's a problem. So just the simplest form, take it as a win, like making your bed up in the morning is a win for people who can't or didn't want to get. So you have to be mindful of that also, to create healthy morning routines and nightly routines and so on. And lastly, to prioritize what matters most. Time management, because if we're horrible at time management, it's bad for mental health, it's bad for physical health. We're running into problems in school and deadlines and work. So it's important to create schedule. I've learned hourly schedule is important, especially for youth, young professionals, for everyone, just to make sure that you're prepared for things during the day, that your day is prepared for. Even if it's not going according to plan, put something else in place. If you had something planned for a specific time and it didn't go according to plan, wing it, do something different, shake it up, change the monotony of things and make sure that your days are different, but make sure it's planned because you need to be prepared. And also just to make sure that you're prioritizing what matters most and not running into problems with deadlines or using up your energy because you're late on a task. So it's really important to create the schedule. Here at Future Focus, we're really, really grateful for the opportunity that we've been given to be on this platform. We're grateful for partners that we had and great organization to create a safe space for youths and young professionals. We provide workshops for communities and schools and available resources through certified mental health first aids and peer counseling. So we're just grateful for just organizations like RAPTT and NIHERST and also Healthy Kinder International LLC. And we are willing, Future Focus is willing to work with any entity, any organization, any other NGOs, ministries, organization that wants to work in the youth space to create a more healthier environment for our young people. We're ready for work and we're ready to go to work. We've been working And for those of you who want to work with us, for those of you who could hear my voice, we need your help in every way possible. The youths and our young people are our future. The work should have started years ago, but we could start now because here's where it is, here's where we are at the moment. So it's important that we start where we are. We're grateful for like-minded people like Cindy Andrews in Tobago and Chris Hussein in South Trinidad, Kershaw Rez in the East and Nejma, and so many more in the West who are doing the work on the ground and making sure that we break the stigma when it comes to mental health. Just making sure that when we speak on mental health, it's like we're saying we have a headache. We need to get to that point where we could say, hey, this is how I feel. I'm not feeling okay. And somebody could say, hey, I know a good therapist, so I know you could visit this person. We need to normalize mental illness. We need to normalize this for young people or youth because they need it. And as I said, the time should have been years ago, but it is now. We have now, and I'm grateful for the opportunity again. And on behalf of myself, the president, and everyone at Future Focus Empowerment Institute International, we say thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Now, this is the opportunity for our participants to sort of engage with you all a little bit. So we do have a few questions in the chat that we wish to advance to each of you. So the first person is Cindy, Miss Andrews. If you could share and give us some insights on what would be some immediate remedies, if any at all, can a parent utilize to help their children deal with academic disappointment?
Good afternoon again, everyone. I think that's an excellent question and something some persons may overlook. Academic disappointment is something that, depending on the type of support a child has, it determines how they respond to it. Now, as Caribbean people, and this is something I have experienced, when our children are performing well, we often don't say, you're doing a good job. We tend to want to motivate them to do better because we know that they can. So part of the process of helping them to deal with disappointment comes from creating a space where even when they are performing well, they do have the support and the encouragement so that when they don't meet a mark that they wanted to, or they were pushed to excel beyond how they are already performing, they know that it does not result in their parent withdrawing affection or attention or even punishing them for not doing what is expected of them. Ensuring that students are able to identify the reasons why they may not have achieved the mark. So in terms of the language that is used when a child communicates that they have not performed well, it's extremely important that the parent is open. So let's discuss. Why do you think you got this mark instead of the one that you wanted? We allow our youth to share what they think the issue was. Is it that they didn't have enough time to study? Have they been having difficulties understanding the material? Is it that they need further support in grasping the concepts and the terms? Or maybe they just don't like the subject and it requires them to apply themselves more. One of the things I like to encourage is ensuring that students learn or are aware of their learning style. And we traditionally encourage students to write out the information. As we know, the chalk and talk, so they go into the classroom, it's on a blackboard. Because we have transitioned to a blended system of virtual learning and some students going back into face-to-face, it's important now more than ever for students to really tap into what learning style best helps them. So when they come out of the school system, they are still able to apply themselves to the material and still engage with it so that they can perform as best as they can. So one, ensures an environment where they are able to communicate and express both their wins and their disappointments without feeling as if they would not be supported is extremely important. Ensuring that the way that the conversation occurs, the type of language that is used, and also encouraging our students to identify the ways that they learn best so that they are better able to help themselves when they feel challenged beyond their capacity.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And this question is to Dr. Green. Given that mental illness is becoming prevalent, what are your thoughts on mental health sessions being incorporated into the formal education curriculum?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So we actually, due to the shortage that has happened in the mental health field across all of our clinicians, right? Whether it be social workers, psychologists, counselors, there has been a push for a curriculum being put in for within the formal curriculum. Now, this is now in the United States, education is sovereign across states. So not every state, I'm sure everyone has seen in the news, not every state is equal when it comes to education, right? However, the way that we focus on socio-emotional wellness and socio-emotional functioning can be, because we have, if anything, if data has not shown, and what the past 2 years has not shown, is that we have all dealt with something, and this has maybe provide some kind of equity in the way in which we have expressed or understood or empathized with what has happened across globally. And so I do advocate for that, actually. I do think that it's important for teachers to understand how to connect with students that maybe have some difficulty or maybe displaying some presentation that is not in the everyday daily functioning that student maybe normally does experience or encounter or display. There is a push for a skill set. So for example, there is the second step curriculum, which focuses on socio-emotional wellness and the understanding of teachers or social workers or clinicians to go in and do push-ins with this curriculum within the classroom, normally during an elective or during a few moments in advisory, or maybe like a homeroom, if you will, like a zero period, where they do a check-in with students. They provide that understanding of what to do if a friend doesn't like you anymore, what to do if there's a recess situation, or the infamous drama that happens, during recess, or during, in middle school with the girls' drama, the boys' drama, or, whatever that may be. And so you can probably notice where I've worked in the past. And so we understand that those types of curriculums help with self-regulation, self-awareness, understanding my own impact in that situation, understanding the accountability that happens within that as well. And that all ties into that socio-emotional functioning and that wellness that can be taught within the formal skill sets of the curriculum. And it doesn't just have to be a formal education. It's formal skill set such as second step, that type of curriculum. It can just be certain questions that are asked. I like to teach. I like to provide the teachers that I work with resources such as index cards and they give an index card out to all the students, and the student and a Sharpie or a marker or colored pencil, and they write down how do they feel today, or maybe do it in between. Maybe there's a break in between the course for that period, and they can say, how do you feel at this moment? How's everything going? Or maybe do a check-in before they leave, before they do the exit ticket or assignment that is needed before they end the period, and do a simple check-in. And these things help because then they can identify, okay, what happened in the middle of the course, what happened during the middle of the period, if it's in the beginning of the period, what happened before you got to my class, or what happened maybe on the way to school, did something happen? it allows for those questions. And so you can then provide that informal understanding of the child and maybe get some insight. I also like to encourage and empower the school counselors, right? Because in a lot of ways, the school counselors, especially, they get tied up and caught up in a lot of scheduling, or maybe that scheduling, or just a lot of administrative things. And a lot of times they don't really get to check in with the students, especially because there's so many students in ratio to the counselor. So at this moment for psychologists, it's 1 per 1,000. So for every 1,000 people's per populace, there is 1 psychologist. So for the counselors, it's supposed to be a little bit less, but for some reason, somehow it becomes a little bit more. And so they're unable to really check in. So having these little nuances during the day for them allow for them to still be gatekeepers as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. Very informative as usual. And this question is to Mr. Hernandez. What do you tell someone who is sensitive about disappointing their parents and is trying to balance the wants of their parents as well as their personal career goals? What would be some advice you can give to someone in that situation?
That's a tough one. I think it goes back to, again, discovering yourself and understanding self and just being comfortable with the things that you want to do as a young person, whether it's to study or a career path, as you said. And I mean, most parents want the best for their children, obviously, but some parents want to live vicariously through their children. And I think some children see that. And some do it because they don't want to be, I guess, disrespectful, rude, or they just want to please their parents. But I would say to follow your passions. It might be tough, it might be hard, but you have to follow what you want to do, because at the end of the day, think about the repercussions after a couple of years when you're in a job that you don't want to do, when you studied something that you didn't want to study. You don't want to have resentment for your parents, one. So it's important that you could actually sit down with them and have a conversation. Might be tough, but have a heart-to-heart conversation with your parents about some of the things that you're passionate about. And if it aligns with theirs, fine. But if it doesn't, you need to follow yours. And that's the advice I would give to any young professional or any young person who wants to study or go into a career. It's yours, so you have to follow your passion. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And I have a few questions, and this is open to any one of the panelists. The first being, as a parent, how do you help your child or young adult who is depressed? So this can be a response from either Ms. Andrews, Dr. Green, Mr. Hernandez. The floor is open.
Okay, well, I'll start. So when you look at depression, you want to look at what that looks like, right? Because a depressive affect, or the presentation of a depressive affect, or a child that is displaying depression can look different across all children and across all humans. And so you want to be able to understand, what does that look like for your kid, and how long and how frequent, right? So if we're looking at it clinically, we're saying over a 6-month period. That's clinically. So if you go to a therapist, or if you go to, someone like myself, they'll probably ask, well, how long has this been going on? How long have you observed? If a child is depressed, or a depressive affect, you normally see a change in mood. So I always like to preface with this first before we get into what do you do with depression, right? Because you have to understand, what are we looking at when we look at depressive affect? And we're looking at a difference in mood. Maybe being a little bit too self-critical, and being too self-critical may be for a child that's a little bit older in age, maybe 8 or 9, 10, 11, going into adolescence, where they can understand that criticism within themselves. They're starting to compare themselves to other peers, maybe seeing some things on TV, maybe social media, which I do not recommend. And they're seeing they're seeing a comparison or a difference in themselves as compared to someone else, and saying, well, what what is wrong with me and why is that happening? There's a lack of energy and effort into what they're doing. So maybe 6 months ago, they were vibrant, they were, swimming, they were playing tennis, badminton, all kinds of sports. They were up and going. They were up at 7 a.m. They're doing what they need to do. They're raising their hand in class. And then all of a sudden, they're not. They're a little bit more lethargic. There's a lack of appetite. They don't want to eat. They're not sleep. They're maybe sleeping for longer, especially if they're adolescents. Normally that is a little normal, but not so much. They're not enjoying the same things that they wanted to do. And they're having that somatization. So complaining about everything. They're always having a headache. They're always having a pain. Something's always wrong. They're not feeling well. And so that's when you want to have a conversation. So if there are all of these things that you're seeing and you're seeing it over the course of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you want to ask a question. Is everything okay? Has something changed? If there's an avoidance of school or maybe learning or maybe not wanting to go to that specific activity, maybe there's something going on at that activity. Maybe there's a change in the peers. Maybe the teacher is not there and they just don't want to say it. Or maybe something's happening amongst the peer group, right? So maybe they're getting bullied, or maybe there's a difference in the changes. Maybe they're not being accepted anymore. They're not the popular one anymore, or maybe the most well-liked. So there are a lot of factors that go into why these things are happening. And if that is happening, I always recommend that you speak to the school and make sure that what has happened at the school. You want to make sure that what's happening. Then I would go to that your child's coach or activity and ask what is happening at the coaching, what is happening, with the coaching, what is happening at the activity, right? And then I would make an appointment with the pediatrician or a therapist, just for that objective party to ask those questions and to maybe get more insight and information. It's always good to have that conversation. It's always good to have daily questioning and conversations with your child. Ask all the questions. My baby is 19 months old. I always ask him, how's daycare? I want to know. I know he can't tell me much, but I still want to know. Why? Because I that's just who I am, but I have to ask. And so you want to get into the habit of asking constantly, is everything okay at school? What's happening? Always creating that open conversation with your family and with your children so that they feel comfortable. And if they're not comfortable with you, let them know, like, listen, you can always speak to, the other person in the household, whatever your family composition looks like, but definitely creating that open conversation to make sure that you know what's going on, and definitely check in with the school always. Thank you.
Thanks again, Dr. Green. And again, this question is open to any one of the panelists, and we'd like to pull it back to Trinidad and Tobago. So what exactly can we do as a society to better embrace mental health issues locally? So I know many of our panelists, they may be US based, and you all are connected to Trinidad and Tobago, but what can we do as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago within our local society to better embrace mental health issues?
I need to remember to unmute my mic, but I would say I'm going to jump in here because this is something that I am extremely passionate about. And I think it's something that we often overlook, the role and influence of culture on how we see things, how we view the world, how we interact with each other, how we think and feel about ourselves. And when it comes to mental health, culturally, we have this thing where we refer to people who may be experiencing mental health issues as mad. We define people who may have experiences with mental health conditions by these conditions. So if somebody is having a psychotic episode or had a psychotic episode, they now become characterized and labeled as this crazy person. And we allow these moments to define people. It's also extremely important for us to acknowledge that because we have such a rich, beautiful culture, that our belief system often affects our ability to fully engage and embrace the different aspects and the multifaceted nature of mental health. For example, I am Tobagonian, so we have the rich cultural history of embracing our folklore tradition. It's something that we keep alive. The ideas of sukunyas and lajables and all of these things, of jumbies in Lekatu. But when we have this strong cultural heritage and past, we often use that as an explanation for unexplainable symptoms that may manifest with someone. So moving beyond the part where we focus solely on physical symptoms and we overlook mental health, if we cannot explain something physically, we often look to the spiritual realm to explain it. So we jump past mental health again and look for another way to explain why someone may be experiencing this. So if someone may again have a mental breakdown or may have a change in their personality because they are experiencing a bout of depression, or they may be experiencing mania, we say, all right, somebody walk over on them. We do not allow ourselves the opportunity to fully embrace the different aspects of mental health care because, one, we don't want anyone to label us as crazy. We like to say it have more mad people outside and inside. And that's true because a lot of persons may require help. They may not be mad, they may not be crazy, but they may require mental health care. But because of the level of stigma and discrimination we culturally promote and have deemed acceptable, because we just say things and we laugh it off, there are people that are hurting and that need help, that internalize this, and it limits their ability to, one, express themselves, and two, seek help. So now we have more people masking how they're feeling, which makes it even more difficult for them to want to achieve or obtain help. And then when we do not cater for the fact that we need to also be compassionate and understanding about how influential it is for some persons to hold on to their primary beliefs and practices about spirituality and folklore, we overlook or we may often misdiagnose or even not consider how this affects someone who treats or needs treatment. Because if somebody believes in a jumbo, it's different across the world. Because our belief in jumbies may come across as something, if somebody said this is something, we can begin classing that is this a visual hallucination that somebody's experiencing. But because of our rich cultural roots, it's not foreign. So we also have to account for this. And sometimes because we have a lot of training outside of the Caribbean, we forget that we need to come back and apply this lens. We forget that we need to take into consideration the experiences of the people, of ourselves when we provide treatment or we want to raise awareness. We cannot ignore and we cannot limit the impact and influence of our everyday lives and the things that we embrace and we normalize. So a lot of coping mechanisms may look like persons drinking at the bar. But drinking at the bar is also how some persons find therapy, because that is where all the open, unfiltered conversation happens, where there's an opportunity for vulnerability, but nobody's taking anybody seriously. So you can say what you want, depending on how far-fetched it is, they may not take it serious. But if you have something on your chest, you still get to take it off. So then, knowing all of this, how do we then continue to promote and raise awareness without neglecting these aspects, without making it seem like if it is wrong to have a strong cultural history? We take into consideration, we try to apply what we know about our past as we move forward. So we do not eradicate or we do not make persons feel inferior for having their beliefs. But in addition to acknowledging that their belief and their way of thinking is valid, because this is how we continue to preserve our culture, we also encourage, while breaking the stigma, that there are different ways that persons can receive help. And we also need to take it into the communities. We have to decentralize access to mental health care. We must ensure that within our communities, we have persons, and again, this is what I appreciate with what Future Focus and Health Tech in the Institute did. They train young persons across Trinidad and Tobago. So at least in one community, in one youth group from this program, there are persons who are equipped to know, okay, this is what this looks like. And even though they may not be able to do a high level intervention or assessment, they can speak to their peers in a way that is relatable. And because of that level, that ability to connect with someone, we must make the information understandable and we must allow them to connect. And Dr. Green had a very important point. She said she doesn't make the information too technical for only one group of persons to understand. And that's something as clinicians, as doctors, as persons within the field, we need to really encourage. How do we include our ideas, our practices, our beliefs, the art form in how we teach about mental health? Because the more we get people engaged in the avenues that they feel comfortable, the one, more educated our population become, and two, the more willing they are to embrace everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. And this is the final question to the panelists. Can you identify or pinpoint some key factors that contribute to mental health challenges in children? I know that we were discussing a lot, but if you can kind of just draw it out for the participants here this afternoon.
So quickly, before we move on to that one, because I could leave that for Dr. Green or Cindy to answer. And Cindy's in Tobago, I'm in Trinidad. But in terms of when you talk about parents and children, I think specifically when we were doing the youth mental health first aid course, we were staff and we needed to do it before we got it to our ambassadors. And we needed to learn that first. We needed to be certified first. And I believe parents need to do that. To make sure that this is the long term. If my child is suffering with anxiety or depression, I need to know what it's about first, so I can help my child also. In the short term, you could have a heart-to-heart conversation and also go to therapy with your child. But in the long term, make sure that you know or you get certified so that you can better help your children and create a safe space for them then. And I think to the other part in creating a safe space is no judgment and no unsolicited opinions and no having them to explain themselves, but creating a place where they're supported and feel respected. And that's what we need to do. I think a lot of the times we talk and it's like a lot of conversations around what we could do, what we're not doing, and it's a lot of fluff, but we need to know what we're dealing with right now, and we need to position ourselves as parents and educators to know how to engage these things with our young people. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Davon, for the contribution. Yes. Any other panelists would like to also elaborate on this point, on this question?
Can you repeat the question one more time? Thank you.
If we can identify or pinpoint some of the key factors that contribute to mental health challenges in children.
So some of the key points could be family dynamic, family shifts. A lot of times with children, they may not themselves have the family shifts, but they can empathize with someone else, and then they take on the feelings of another person, for another child, or maybe another family, or maybe they're seeing a child or a group of people doing something that they don't like. And so they then want to avoid the situation or try to navigate around it. So it may look as if they are being impacted, they are directly impacted by it, but in so forth, they are being indirectly impacted. And I have noticed that with a lot of the students actually within the last day or so, they, especially with my bilingual family, my Spanish speaking families, and also my Asian American families, they felt a little bit more of the impact, and it's not indirect, it's indirect, but they still feel it. And so they want to know, well, will this happen to me? Am I next? will this happen to my family? And so it's not so much that they're being traumatized, but they're getting the direct impact. And those are some of the key points as well. I agree with Mr. Hernandez with his point of parents advocating and actually getting that information for themselves and getting ahead of the information with mental first aid and understanding what psych first aid is and understanding the different components that are identified with mental health. Because in the same way that we focus on physical health and going to the pediatrician, going to our internist whenever we're feeling ill, is the same way that we need to focus on mental health. And that will help to then identify and create and understand those factors and those determinants that impact our emotional well-being.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Green. Now we do have a bit more questions in the chat, but what I will definitely do, and the team will do, is circulate it to each one of our panelists, and we will definitely be able to send you a response via email, so you all can look out for that. So I want to again thank the panelists for being here today. It was an extremely informative and enlightening discourse. And this brings us to the second segment of today's webinar, which focuses on evidence-based programs that impact youth mental health. But before we begin, we wish to segue into an interlude by Dr. Margaret Naked Chatur, and this video focuses on mental health in children and coping strategies.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Hello, boys and girls. I am Dr. Margaret. How are you doing today? Are you feeling happy or sad? Let's talk about your emotions and what you can do when you're angry, when you're sad, or you just don't feel like talking to anyone about anything. If someone gets you angry at school and you feel like hitting them, or your parents shout at you and you want to shout back, take a moment, calm down, count backwards from 10 to 1. Let's count with a count. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you're feeling tired, a little bit sad, frustrated, when you have so many things to do, it is okay to take a break. Go and take a nap or walk around the house if you can, ride your bike, play some music, play a game, or exercise.
Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes.
If someone has done something bad to you, do not keep your feelings inside, even if they have told you to be quiet or to hush your mouth. Tell your mommy or your daddy or auntie or miss, someone you trust. Tell them about it. You are important. You are beautiful. You have a right to be happy. This is Dr. Margaret saying goodbye for now until we chat again. Take care of yourself. Be safe.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Thank you so much to Dr. Naked Chatur. These are certainly some coping strategies that can definitely be applied by many teachers, parents, and guardians. So it's an appropriate segue into our second segment. And at this point, I wish to reintroduce our co-moderator, Mr. Darren Jack, who will take you through our second discussion panel. Just a reminder to leave your questions in the chat and identify to whom the question is directed to, and we will be sure to advance. There's also the option of utilizing the raise hand icon, and you can unmute your mic. Should your question not be answered during the session, we are going to get the necessary responses from the panelists, and we'll be sure to email it to you. Mr. Jack, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Ms. Hector. We now wish to introduce to you Mr. Gad Vozet, founder of the DMN project and host of the TV program, The Fellas. Gad is on a mission to help men learn how to communicate effectively about things that are on their minds. The aim is to build a bridge between men and themselves, creating an environment for open, transparent conversations, finding new solutions to modern-day problems that affect both young and older men. Mr. Gad will begin the panel discussion as he presents on men and youth mental health. Also on the panel you'll be familiar with is Dr. Astral Webb, a medical doctor with over 2 decades of senior level healthcare leadership experience, spearheading initiatives about chronic disease management and mental health well-being. She is duly certified as both a U.S. nationally recognized youth and adult mental health first aid instructor. Dr. Webb will honor us with her insights on young mental health first aid. And finally, Mrs. Colette Cyrus Burnett. Mrs. Colette Burnett is the founder of the global food warrior movement that is intended on making food security possible one community, city, and nation at a time. Colette is an out-of-the-box thinker that promotes health and wellness through our choices in food and all stages of food production. Ms. Colette Burnett will today present on the connection between food science and mental health. I now invite to the floor Mr. Gad as he ushers in part 2 of our panel discussion today. Mr. Gad?
First off, thank you guys. Let me know if you can hear me properly. You guys hearing? All right, good.
Yes, Mr. Gad.
So, again, yes, thank you. So definitely a good thing to be on a panel such as this, I think, where we highlight different areas. There are definitely many opportunities to change things. And I think this is definitely a good start to it. So I'm definitely excited to be invited to something like this. So I appreciate Dr. Astral and Colette for making me part of this as well. We want to talk about men and youth mental health. I think the fact that we could talk about men and youth mental health is definitely important because I have always talked about getting back to the foundation of things. And right now, if you think about the foundation of the men itself, it would be the youth, right? It would be the young men who are definitely facing a lot more challenges at this generation than most generations would have faced in terms of comparisons, a lot more peer pressure, and in terms of trying to be something other than themselves. So when we talk about the youth mental health, I think I really want to dive into that a little bit more because of the fact that I feel as though this is this situation we're facing where a lot of them do not know how to identify themselves. And if they're not placed in the right environment, it becomes even more difficult. So we've talked a lot about in the last hour and a half about environments, about trauma. We've talked about helping or to create different strategies to bring things into school. I remember in school, when you go to the guidance counselor, it was only if you did something bad. I think it should be something that you should have an opened up policy about where it's just to be able to talk about something, and it should be part of the curriculum as well. So I think it was Dr. Green mentioned it earlier in terms of it should be part of the curriculum where we talk about mental health. With men, which is something that I focus more on, I think we've always been programmed that communication sometimes can equal weakness, especially when it comes to feelings. I think this is where we get an opportunity to change that. And that's what we've been trying to do with our initiative at the DMN Project, with some talks online. I know Dr. Ashel and Colette and I have had these conversations to include some type of topics about men and their mental health as well. I think the young men part of it is definitely has to be a focus because that's where it all starts. As we dive more into different topics from now and we go forward into that, you will see the repercussions of it not being that way in terms of domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago, which I've paid particular attention to. But not just the problem, but what is the solution? You know, it's quick that we identify the solution, the problem, but we hardly ever get to the point where we continuously identify the solution to what the problem was. And sometimes when we see things happen in public or we see things on the news, we're quick to pass judgment without looking at the basis of it or the environments that some of these people come from, and how could we contribute to a better environment for them to be able to share their emotions and their feelings, especially since men are always programmed in terms of vulnerability / equals weakness. So I'm really, really happy to be on a panel that people can actually ask questions about this kind of stuff. I know Devon Hernandez talked about young men in terms of in the workforce. My son is also a young man in the workforce. I know he has a lot of different things on his mind. If he's doing what is right, if he's making the right decision as per his parents, you know, what he studied in school, is that what he's doing as a job? So again, the young men are definitely the main focus because the young men become the men. So how do we help them? How do we create more platforms for them? And ultimately, how do you create a safer environment? And when I use the word safer environment, normally safer environment normally does not come with a male aspect to it. And you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It normally does not come with a male aspect to it, because when we feel safe, we don't think a man needs to feel safe. So that's what we're trying to change. The bridge that I'm trying to build is just for men to be able to communicate effectively. Not just communicate, because we can communicate by yelling, by going by the bar, you know, by hanging out, but to communicate effectively how one feels about himself. How does one identify with himself? How does he see himself? And then be able to express that to the people that he loves and the people that are in his environment. And how do they make him safe to be able to do that consistently to find a solution to the problems that we face nowadays? So that's more or less me wrapping it up in that part of it. I think as much as we get into the conversation, there's more different topics about how do we do this? How do we create different options? Devon had a good idea in terms of collaboration. I think that is one of the best things for us, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, because we need that. We definitely need that. We need men to collectively make a decision to change. I think Darren is still on mute.
My apologies. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Gard, for such an in-depth presentation. It was indeed appreciated by myself and no doubt all present here today. I now present to you Dr. Astrid Webb as she brings her address on youth mental health first aid. Dr. Webb.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm going to share my screen.
I certainly can, Dr. Webb.
Perfectly. Thank you very much. So I want to say thank you to all the panelists so far. I think we have learned that we have to pay attention to our youth. And when we ask the question, how are youth? We really need to ask the question, how do we identify that we need to say, how are youth? And really the gold standard should be youth mental health first aid. And I know you've heard a lot about it, so I'll try my best to give you a quick overview. Healthy Kinder International has been providing cultural competency-based training in health, wellness, and prevention strategies. And amongst this, we promote both the adult mental health first aid certification training as well as the youth mental health first aid training. Now, you heard from Dr. Green, she already admitted there are not enough mental health professionals in the field. And unfortunately, with every wellness visit, you may get a physical, but not necessarily a mental health screening or assessment. I know many of the pediatricians are now trying to do it, but we're not there yet in terms of the scope or the level that we should. So what is really great in the meantime is really educating everyone in our community, every adult over the age of 18, about what to look for, especially when it comes to our youth. So we know that the youth mental health first aid training is actually the only evidence-based program being used in 22 countries in the world, including the United States. This is our gold standard for our non-clinical approach. It is an 8-hour interactive learning program. And again, it's a public education and awareness program. So all participants will be able to identify risk factors and warning signs. You've heard that from most of our panelists this morning, especially those representing the youth groups. And we specifically focus on the most common mental health disorders. So the anxiety, depression, suicide, ideation, substance use disorders, and some of the psychosis disorders, to name a few. Every participant learns the tools in order to assist that young person and identify or learn how to identify proper self-care strategies to support that young person. And again, there are professional as well as community-based resources. So we teach our first aiders how to identify it and where it's lacking, how to build it. And this is what we love with Future Focus. As an organization, each one of their first aiders have begun to provide resources that did not exist before. And so at the conclusion of the 8-hour training program, everyone gets a 3-year certification recognized by the National Council on Behavioral Health, and it's recognized through the state of Maryland, where we at Healthy Kinder International are located. All right, so we have provided the youth mental health first aid training in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have tried to use various adult learning styles through our activities so that everyone can grasp. So we have done role playing, group sessions where the entire group is engaged, so as well as break out into small groups where they may discuss a certain case scenario or about the signs or the symptoms they see in a young person to better understand what they may be experiencing. And of course, depending on the industry, we target specific needs. So for example, for our schools, their needs may be a little more different from those in a faith-based community where we're dealing with beliefs systems, or those who are in a clinical arena. What the nurses, the doctors, the clinical psychologists, social workers, what do they see? And so we try to provide as much in terms of the signs, how you interpret the signs, and where you would lead these, not only the youth, but also their families to the resources that are appropriate. Currently, Healthy Kinder International has certified 314 youth mental health first aiders in Trinidad and Tobago. This is amazing for us. We started in 2017, and we've had a number of training sessions. Both we began in person and then later virtually. So we have had 13 different types of organizations go through this training, including Children's Authority. I'm so proud. When we were there, they actually had all of their regional office members be certified at that time, except for Tobago. So the next time we will include them. And of course, this was done over 14 training sessions. And I just want to point out, I know she's on the call today. This is Joanne Phillips Spencer, who is currently one of our champions for youth mental health first aid. And when we decided to take this to Trinidad and Tobago, she was definitely one who spearheaded and wanted us to make sure that we focused on the education system. So thank you so much for your commitment. But we've also expanded the training to our TT diaspora, right? So through the Embassy of the Trinidad and Tobago, under the leadership of His Excellency, Anthony Philip Spencer, most of the staff there have been trained either in adult or youth mental health first aid. And also this has allowed for many of the staffers, we've understood that this has allowed them to better connect with the families of the TT diaspora, being away from home, being in different cultures, and also be available for the international students in the United States. So that was really a big win. And then we extend the training to many of the nonprofit organizations who support the TT diaspora. So all of these individuals are counted in the 314 count. All right, so the objectives, just really briefly, the course is designed to increase the knowledge about signs and symptoms and the risk factors of the mental health disorders that affect our young people. And you will learn, each person will learn the 5-step action plan that you can execute as soon as you become certified. You're able to apply that 5-action plan. All the participants have had an increased confidence level in order to assist a young person in distress, and they know how to locate the professional and self-help resources. And also we've seen a significant decrease in the stigma and discrimination, and you have heard it from so many of our speakers who are actually certified. And we know overall this course is probably the most impactful that we've seen. Staff, parents have been able to identify students who have emotional challenges. So the sooner they get the help, as you heard from Dr. Green, the better the overall outcome. We've seen an improvement between existing school services, support, and community resources, especially when our first aiders go out there and connect our youth to whatever services are available. And we also have seen a significant increase in the number of referrals to the professions and community resources. And here is where we see in the data, we do not have enough services, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So we have a lot of work to do in this area. We've seen that even the participants who go through the training, it has done, it has such an impact on them. It has enhanced their individual mental well-being, not only for themselves, but also their families. And finally, we see that the youth are receiving help and that they are on the path to recovery. So I wish to thank you, and we hope that many of you will consider joining the team of youth mental health first aiders in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Wow, Dr. Webb, very insightful remarks indeed, very insightful. Thank you again for being present at the seminar, and we cannot express our gratitude enough. We will now direct our attention to Mrs. Colette Cyrus Burnett as she enlightened us on the connection between food science and mental health. Mrs. Burnett.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, NIHERST. Thank you, RAPTT, my fellow panelists and presenters. I am so grateful to be here on this topic. It's really timely and very important to our wellness, both as an individual and collective. And as we all have been feeling it, we've been going through every type of mental health challenge. With COVID, it had about 127 school shootings in the US in this 1 year. The amount of challenges that we have had to brace, it's no wonder all of us are challenged mentally in any, small ways and large ways. Dr. Green, Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Andrews, what you shared really moved me, and I so appreciate being here. That as the CEO and founder of Global Food Warrior, my passion is food. So all levels of food. I am a chef as well, so cooking is, of course, one of the things I enjoy, but eating is probably my favorite part. So today, I wanted to talk about how food actually intersects with your mood. Today, I'm here to discuss the effect of food on your brain. Mr. Hernandez mentioned routines. How about we discuss a food routine? You ever wonder why some days you wake up and you bound out of bed, right? And you skip through the day and you smile at everything. And then there are other days when you could barely roll out. Like the covers just seem to be heavier and can't take a shower, even consider tidying up. Certainly good sleep and a purpose to wake up to helps tremendously. But the fact is, our bodies are scientifically balanced by the food that we eat. It's either balanced or unbalanced. It's a big statement, I know, but I can prove it. In 2020, the Harvard Health did a study, and the title on it was Food on the Brain. I will link it in the comments so that you can take a look at the details, okay? But it stated that food fuels your brain 24/7, even when you're asleep. So if we were to consider what type of fuel that we're putting into our bodies, we all go to the gas station, right? Everybody is like mad about gas. Gas prices are too high. But what about food, right? We all go to the gas station, we know which premium we should put in, or if we should put in super. If we challenge ourselves around what type of fuel, food we're putting into our bodies, are we putting in premium or super, or are we using kerosene? Because premium food looks like live, fresh, as close to coming off of the tree as you could possibly get. I'm not sending anybody to pick people mangoes, guilty a little bit. But what I am saying is that we should find ways to incorporate natural food, which is at the premium level, to our health. Then we have what's super, which is more like cooked at home with love from your mommy, for your family. It's really good food. But then we have the restaurant food, which is more like the kerosene, fast food, the fried foods, the packaged foods, processed foods. Those are the ones that really have a really poor effect. It's poor fuel. Diets high in refined sugar are harmful to your brain directly. It promotes oxidative stress, big time. Not the aspect, right? But it's true. Food can bring on stress. Stress leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to every single disease that is in your body, both physical and mental. It's the cause of all. It worsens the symptoms of your mood disorders, like any type of depression or anxiety. But here's the good news. That same study that Harvard did also shows that many opportunities are there for us to eat better, and simply by managing our diet, incorporating a natural B vitamin like niacin into your diet does have a very, very positive effect, and altogether can eliminate depression and anxiety. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not equipped, and so I'm not equipped to tell you for sure, but do your research. Niacin has proven to be one of the most beneficial B vitamins that we can have for our mood, and it's available in food. The mental health and food intersection is not new. Unfortunately, though, it's not much acknowledged because, well, the big money is in pharmaceuticals. And as such, the power is in the wrong hands, and we will get hooked on pills if that's what, brings in the money. Yet we can take control of our mental health and wellness. Should we be proactive about our own wellness? Then we eat better. There's a new field of study, and it's called nutrition psychiatry. It studies the correlation and consequences of what we eat and how we feel and behave. Check it out. There's we all know about serotonin. It's a neurotransmitter that's in our brain, right? And that balances your mood. Actually, it's produced in your gut. I didn't know this, but 95% of the serotonin in your body that goes to your brain is produced in your gut. It's in your gastrointestinal tract. Do you know what else is in there though? When we put the food in, the types of food that we choose to eat, what else is in there is parasites. Parasites affect the amount of actual nutrition that gets into your blood and bones. Yeah? And it impacts it negatively. By simply adding something like pawpaw with some of the seeds, and you ingest that on a daily basis. Or in Trinidad, we have almost every East Indian home has a neem tree. If you eat neem leaves, just 1 or 2 a day, it eliminates parasites from your body. It allows your gut room to truly feed you, and the serotonin levels go up, which makes you happier. You need it to regulate your mood and even pain. I can tell you that at the end of the day, if you start paying attention to your food, it makes you feel 10 times better. Try eating clean for just 2 weeks. And if you see what happens to your mood and your mindset, you will decide to keep it. More fresh food, live food, fish, cut out the sugar, corn chips instead of corn chips, eat some corn. See if you don't feel better, both physically and mentally. And I will tell you to end, I'll tell you a little personal testimony, okay? A year ago, I decided after being severely asthmatic, slightly overweight, mildly depressed by COVID and everything else that was happening, and just sick all the time, I decided to embark on my own healing journey and decided to start eating differently, shifting my diet day to day. I decided a little bit at a time, a little less meat, a little more, vegan. So eating mostly vegan and drinking healing tea blends, which is available everywhere from mint to toasty. Again, in front of our yards, we have this. Incorporating a little bit more prayer and a lot more purpose into my life. Today, I can attest to losing about 20 pounds and a boatload of stress. And I am happier most days than should be allowed. I'm grateful to be here. I wish every single one here happy eating. I'm grateful again for the opportunity to share. You can reach me at globalfoodwarrior.com. And I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colette. Thank you very much. I don't know about you, but I know myself, I'll be making some changes to my diet in the future as of today. So thank you for the information. At this time, I'd like to allot a few moments for the panelists to answer questions from our audience. We have some questions on the reel here, and Mr. Voisin, I would like to direct the first set of questions to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Question, in recent times, and I'm restricting the time to recent because that is the time that we have our return to physical school. We have seen that the interaction of our student population has been, as one would call, interesting, for a lack of a better term. And it seems to me that the usual culprit now is COVID and the lack of interaction that these students had with each other in terms of the distance learning. My question to you is that seeing that COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19 is sort of the usual suspect or the center of attention now when anything that happens within our school system goes wrong, he is the suspect. What topic or what discussion that we are not having that needs to be held? In other words, what is that topic that we need to give more attention to and not surround everything with the effects of COVID-19?
All right, so I think we're always quick to find culprits. I'm glad you used that word. We're always quick to find culprits, just like we're always quick to identify just problems and not solutions. I think the actual lack of interaction, it definitely shows that there's not a lot of interaction at home, if you think about it, right? Because that is where most of them were. We have a lot of parents that are always so busy doing all of other things. Being home was actually a test for them more than it was for kids. So now you find that the environments that we talked about earlier, which is what is the environment that the young men and women are coming from when they go to the school. So now we find out what the environment looks like. We understand what the environment sounds like, what it looks like. So a lot of times it's home where we would normally say, well, okay, well, what's going on at home? If it is the kids are giving trouble at school, and now that they're home and they come up from that environment, they go back to school, they were not even interacting with parents at home as well. So the culprit there is not even COVID. I think COVID actually was kind of like unmasking what was really happening in the meantime. And that a lot of times the school was being the babysitter for a lot of these kids and not the parents. So I think it's mainly taking it back to the conversation of the environments. What environments are we putting our kids in? What are they learning environments that they do have in terms of at home? Because then whatever they learn at home now in this situation, in the present situation, is what they're going to take back into school. So I think the culprit there was definitely what was the environment that we had at home to more or less get these kids back into interaction, get them back into learning how to be personal, how to deal with one-on-one interactions as well. Because when they got back into school, actually most of the kids were actually happy to get back into school and to stay at home, if that makes any sense at all.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Thank you, Ms. Another question, what would you say are some healthy co-curricular activities to mentally engage in your expertise in dealing with their mental health?
For the kids, I mean, listen, we have to take this back to, it might sound bad or it might sound old, but back in the day where kids were just actively outside, kids were actually doing stuff and involved in activities. I mean, I'm out here in Texas, and this is one of the places where these kids are out every weekend having some type of activity. If it's not football, I'd say football because it could be from the Caribbean. to baseball, any type of sports. I mean, the video games and like Dr. Green had mentioned about social media, these things are things that these kids are so involved in, they've lost the touch with what physical activity looks and feels like. So I think if it's a mental thing, normally, you know, if I go outside and play some football in the street and come back inside, I'm tired. You know what I mean? Mentally, I'm good because I had some fun, but I'm tired, I want to go sleep. Now it's that a lot of the drain mentally is not even drain from activity or physical activity. A lot of the drain is from comparison, from peer pressure, from things that they see, from things that they're bombarded with, from programming. So I would say it's not really a strategy. It's just kind of bringing it back to the old time where people were actually active and they have that type of active lifestyle.
Okay, I understand. I understand. As I proceed, there's a question from the audience where they're asking, is there a different way depression shows up in young men as opposed to women? And if that is true, how so? And in what ways?
So I'm guessing this, I could take this one. So
yeah, it's directed to you, Mr. Gatt, my apologies. It's directed to you.
I think, you know, I mean, I'll say this because I'm actually, my family, we have a lot of ladies in our family. You know, I myself have 2 daughters, I have 4 nieces, I have a sister. I also have a son. And the differences with the young men and young women that I can tell is that a lot of times the young men do not feel like they have an avenue to talk about stuff. So the depression comes in type of like trying to see wherever they could fit in, they fit in. Whereas the young girls and the young women have more of a support system, which starts off at that age, which is actually pretty good. And it actually helps them. If we look at 3.5% of the men now, like there's such a high percentage of men dealing with depression and suicide that a lot of it comes from the male side of it because there's no outlet. You know, young men feel as though they don't have any outlet. They always feel as though they're misunderstood. Young women always have a friend to call, or they could go do their nails, or they could go to the mall. So I think it shows up differently because a lot of times the young men are looking for a void, whereas the young women have the support system around them. And I think it should be balanced. So by now, 2022, we should be able to have that similar balance where men could go to another man, or the young men could go to other young men and feel confident and safe enough to share how they feel about stuff so that it doesn't get to the point of depression. But if it does get to the point of depression, what are the avenues? Do we have mentors anymore? Do we have groups for young men anymore? Besides just the church-based groups, do we have the young men groups? So those are all things I think from this type of panels, we can implement those things that would help both the young men and also still help the young women because, you know, I think the youth in general definitely need different outlets than Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you, Mr. Gatt. Your response is appreciated. Dr. Webb, you echoed sentiments earlier by Ms. Green, where you said there was a lack of mental health professionals. What do you propose can be done to increase the interest in persons becoming mental health professionals?
Well, absolutely. Well, the first thing we need to notice, there is a lack. So there will always be a job for anyone pursuing the mental health field right now, right? No matter what form of professionals, whether you're clinicians or social workers or so forth. But the statement that I made concerning Dr. Green is actually there's a severe lack for youth mental health professionals. So for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have the regional ministries, right? The regional offices where they provide mental health services. Unfortunately, many of the youth, especially the ones who've gone through the training and know now they need help, they have reached out to them and have not been able to get appointments. Part of it, depending on their age, especially between 16 and 18, it's very difficult to find the appointments. So we have a lack of services. And I think what we need to do is advocate to the various ministries that we need more mental health services, especially those targeted for youth. Youth are not just little adults. And unfortunately, many people assume they are. When we're dealing with mental health challenges, remembering that our youth are concrete thinkers, they don't have experiences. So whatever they believe their feelings are connected to, they accept that as a gospel truth, which is not necessarily the case. Right? So, for example, COVID and COVID lockdown. For many of the children, they almost feel as though, well, my grandmother doesn't want me to go out and play because they don't want me to hang out with my friends. But that's not the case. We're in a pandemic, right? So, those were the reasons that we had, separation, and kids lack that social connection that they yearn for. And so a child, the way they process it is almost as though they're in punishment. It's something they did. They are the ones who carry COVID and cause other people to get sick. And that's just an example how a concrete thinker thinks, right? So our children don't really know how to process all of this. And when we don't talk to them as the adults, they have their own imaginations, or they speak to their friends or family members who may give them misinformation, and they're not clear about what's happening. So for our youth, it's really important that we have therapists, social workers, child psychiatrists speaking to them and dealing with them through these different feelings that they have.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. And another question, I don't know if you addressed this previously, is how is there a website that persons could go to, or some platform that person could go up to sign up to be a mental health professional or be directed onto the right path?
Yes, Mr. Devon Hernandez actually posted it in the chat, and so did I, that Future Focus is actually our contact for youth mental health first aid trainings in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's easier if you send them an email at info@futurefocusemi.org. It's in the chat, and we'll make sure post this webinar that contact information is also shared. If you send them a message to let them know that you're interested in the trainings, they will let you know about the training dates. Right now, we have been offering some of the trainings virtually, and we're hoping that there are a combination of them that we can offer in person. But we need to coordinate location and how we're going to do that, so we don't have an actual schedule available right now. That would be the easiest way to do it. Just send them an email message and we will contact you individually.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Just another question, if you just permit me, please.
Sure.
We touched on the fact there was a lack of mental professionals.
Yes.
We would agree that that exists in the student population as well in schools, secondary and primary schools. What somebody would be persuaded to say is that we have teachers and we have parents now stepping up to be that mental professional in terms of coaching the students, coaching their children. But what do you tell a parent or a teacher who lack that mental awareness or that education enough to guide them on the right path, who have tried the counseling, who have tried introducing them to mentors, who have tried different avenues, and they realize now, hey, I am not getting through to the student, I'm not getting through to my son or my daughter. What advice would you give to that teacher or that parent?
Sure. So first of all, there is no trade-off for the clinical professions, right? When we deal with mental health, we're dealing with a very complex brain, and Dr. Green has demonstrated that, right? So we have to remember, let's stay in our lane as well, because sometimes we find parents and teachers just in their desperation to help the young people, they may give them advice and it could actually set them back further into their mental health challenge. So we want to be very careful not to diagnose if you're not licensed to do so. And, I know we're always seeking self-help strategies or support strategies that can work. It is so important that you raise awareness, become aware of the signs and symptoms, that you go through an education training, just like the Youth Mental Health First Aid, for example, or sometimes there are workshops and summits about mental health. get involved and engage, participate on one of them so that you can understand what the signs and symptoms really look like and what tools, how you could communicate with those young people. It is not a quick fix. This is something that will take a process. So please be patient with your children through this process. I know we're desperate as parents, as teachers, to go in there and do a quick fix, but that's not the case, especially for those children going through adolescence or they're going into young adulthood and they're carrying a lot of psycho-emotional pain and hurt from early childhood. So they need to be able to work through all of those issues. And the best thing a parent and a teacher can do is make sure you know where the resources are. You can connect that child for the professional side and become educated about the things that you can do to support self-care strategies and support strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Thank you. Ms. Colette Burnett, I would like to direct the next question to you. Previously, the then First Lady, Michelle Obama, during her term, she was advocating for healthier meals within the school system. Of course, her reasoning was a better mental health, better physiology, just the overall performance of their academics. I mean, that is a discussion, of course, that was held locally in the different school programs. Now that because of obvious health reasons, the school feeding program has been suspended, what would you say to teachers or parents again, or even principals on presenting recommendations to the powers that be to now make certain changes to the reintroduction of the school feeding program? Yes, we know that the schools possibly, the meals being served possibly may be healthier, but what is that discussion again that should be proposed to the powers that be when it comes to food and our student population?
That is a brilliant question, because if we were to address that well and find success, we could shift how well our children eat on a day-to-day basis so quickly that it would spin your head. Our children are in school 5 days out of the week, yes? And in those schools, each of these schools have had 4-H programs that have been essentially become obsolete. I'm not sure how it could be obsolete when food is necessary for all of us, but I've seen where and have been a part of a movement that has been bringing back gardens that are in community centers as well as in schools. We do it in Brooklyn, we do it in Malawi, we do it here in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Every community has a school, it has a community center, and there should be no reason that we are not growing food on site at each of these. Every single school right now, there are plots of land all around the school. Those lands with grass on it right now could be where our food is being grown without pesticides, could be where we can make our salads from for our children daily. Instead of us waiting for this to happen, we can make this happen as community members, if even the government states that this is difficult for them in whatever way. But I do know that the government has seedling programs that are happening right now. Free seedlings are being offered. There are programs and initiatives that are being run by the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs. And there has been a renewed investment or interest in agriculture. But how we make that make sense is that in every school, once we're growing food, we're now able to control how much pesticides gets on there, right? And if I'm not sure you're aware of this, but pesticides also has the most negative impact to our bodies. I'm sure you've read about what the wax is doing to us. I'm sure there's ways that we can now impact that positively by putting a bit more trust into our own hands, by growing food within our own communities and even involving our community members, which isn't difficult. Every person understands that if we control our food, we're able to now control how much of that negative impact that it can be with pesticides and how it's grown. And we can also encourage our children to go home and grow food at home. 90% of the kids that is involved in our agricultural program, they go back home and they find a way to grow. Even if they don't have land, They grow in a container, they grow in a bucket. They find ways to grow food just to be able to show Miss, I grow a tomato. And I'll tell you something interesting. If you eat a tomato that you grew and you eat one that you bought, totally different taste. Yeah. And the reason it tastes different is 2 reasons. If you pick something that is this close to your hand and to your home, and you get it into your and ingest that as quickly as possible, it's live. It just came off of the vine. But if you buy that tomato instead, you're not sure exactly where it came from, first of all. What did they spray on it? I'm not certain either. How long has it been sitting to get to ripe? It probably came off the vine green and had to go through a process. That process, how good is it for my body? And when it goes in there, it does a different thing. So when you consider, if you grow your food and the taste of that food, and actually the taste of the success for having grown your own food, there's no real, yeah, that's why I smile so much. It's hard to find an angry farmer. Just because if you're growing your own food and you're putting the right things into your body, you'll find that the entire balance shifts for you in so many ways. So for me, growing in every school, in every community, if we have a community center that is not growing food right now, they can reach out to Global Food Warrior. It's part of our movement to be able to make that happen. We are in schools right now. I just spoke to the vice principal at Shoguna's government that we are coming in. We're getting the donations of the seedlings. We're assisting, we're bringing people and hands. And the young people, the children, can you imagine seeing them with their hands in the soil, growing their own food, what that would do for them? So that's what we need, more.
Thank you, Mrs. Colette Cyrus Burnett. And to all our panelists, accept my gratitude for ensuring that the scientific background to the questions were indeed present and relatable to us all. Thank you, panelists, again. Before we close today's webinar, we do have an opportunity for 2 participants to win a prize, and it is based on aspects that we'll discuss today. We want to ensure that you not only remember everything that you were exposed to, but also become an advocate for mental health awareness. So we have 3 questions on the screen. The 2 persons to answer all questions correctly in the fastest time will win a $50 US Amazon card, each courtesy of our collaborating entity, Healthy Kinda. Also, this portion of segment is not open to the staff of NIHERST, RAPTT, and direct contributors to the present event. Note, all winners will be announced to all participants via email. I will now allot participants 2 minutes to enter their answers. Thank you all. At this moment, I would like to reintroduce my co-moderator, Ms. Candice Hector. Candice.
Hi, thank you again, Darren. So this brings us to the close of our event, and we certainly had a fruitful discourse. Yes, and I just want to remind you all that the winners will be announced via email. And we should be sending that to you all, if not today, possibly early in the morning. So you'll have an idea of who exactly would have won that $50 USD Amazon gift card, courtesy Healthy Kinda. So thank you so much for participating. I really need to underscore that this entire session was very informative, very enlightening, and it's something that we will continue to advance with our collaboration with RAPTT. At this point, let me now introduce to you the Manager of HR and Corporate Services at NIHERST, Mrs. Laurette Hope McDonald, who will provide us with the vote of thanks. Mrs. Hope McDonald.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start off by saying good afternoon to the Chairman, Board of Governors, Mr. Andrew Hunt, Governor Babulal, and members of NIHERST Board of Governors, Ms. Marlene Lord Lewis, our President, the President of NIHERST, Vice President Levan Superville, members of NIHERST team responsible for supporting this initiative, whether on screen or off, the key speakers, panelists, and of course, those who partnered with NIHERST in the execution of this event, and of course, the participants. As introduced before, I am Laurette Hope McDonald. I'm the Manager of HR and Corporate Services, and I am so privileged to do the closing remarks for this event. Let me start off by highlighting the fact that Governor Babulal did an excellent job with setting the tone in terms of the pandemic and its impact on the youth. And I think that was critical for us to understand, because a lot of us do not or would not have associated the stress with the youth, because sometimes we believe that we are in it alone as parents or as adults, and we don't understand that they hear what we say and they internalize, and sometimes we neglect to appreciate that. And in listening to what went on a short while ago, I had to reflect on a statement or a quote from Nelson Mandela that says, "The youth of today is the leader of tomorrow." And so that the entire delivery today, highlighted how important it is to deal with the mental health and well-being of the youths. We started off at home with the representative from Children Authority of Trinidad and Tobago giving us the statistics, or in terms of the facts, in terms of how the pandemic has affected the well-being of our children, in terms of health, anxiety. And what brought that on is we need to appreciate that in the home, they would see persons with ill health as a result of the pandemic. They might have experienced death. And whether it's a neighbor, it may not be in your household, it may be a close friend, and having an appreciation of how that impacted them. We also looked at the youth, how it affects the youth, and that delivery from Cindy in terms of sharing with us that, sometimes the youths would react in a certain way, and we cannot assume that it's rudeness. So we need to try to understand and develop ways in terms of how we could treat with that and be better communicators, rather than misunderstanding their feelings and their reactions. So that was very insightful for me, and I believe for most of you. And sometimes, we need to listen a bit more instead of coming to the conclusion that they are being rude, they are being disrespectful, when in reality, it's the only avenue. And that is how they are expressing themselves to us. And we need to see that as signals and how to treat with that. It is applicable in the home, in the school, as well as in the workplace. We also, what I would like to highlight too, is we were also told how we should manage academic disappointments. And sometimes, we try to live through our children. And sometimes, it just highlighted, we want them to do all that we couldn't do. And we also, what was highlighted that is important to understand and appreciate what your child or wants to do and will be happy doing, rather than we are putting pressure on them, additional pressure in a world that in reality comes with so much pressure on its own that as parents, we need to sit and understand what's happening. And how do we understand, even when our children or the persons within our care don't have the words to say, how to express themselves? We were told that we need to look at mood swings, sudden anger, change in friend, change in patterns, always depressed. And sometimes we just dismiss that as a bad day. And so, we, after today's session, we all should take away with the fact that we need to be mindful of these little triggers, these little signals. We also learn that mental health of the first aid training, and that is in terms of educating and informing the public, in terms of how do we treat with the situation, and to eliminate that stigma that mental health is a bad thing and try to hide it away and ignore it, and appreciating that creates problems from very young, and persons, if it's not addressed, they take it into their adult life, into the workplace, because we did not treat with it. So it was very, very insightful to know that there is such training, and the training is indeed for the youth as a result, and also for the adults. What was very interesting too is the food science. All that we heard today like that makes sense. We know that, we know the value of food. But having an appreciation that what we eat impacts us in a way, sometimes we just eat what we like, and it may not always be good for us. And as persons with responsibility for the youth, we have a responsibility to ensure that their diet is indeed appropriate, and so that they would be healthier and they would be more productive in a society. We heard also from a perspective from the young men's point of view. Sometimes we fail to realize that because the young man may not be inducted into this world where he feels that I cannot show my feelings or my emotions, that we need to be mindful of his feelings also. And, so today, a lot of learning, and there are some key points, and I attempted to deal with all of them. I trust that, and one last thing that was important to me, and I believe to most of you, that I think we need to take away with us in terms of how do we incorporate mental health into the curriculum, how we do it in schools. And sometimes, we argue so much on things and say, how can we do it formally? How can we build it in? And it was very, very important when I heard that we can bring it through in home rooms, which is the American system. We can do it through extracurricular activities where we can introduce that, and perhaps, teachers can be trained, or social workers, on how to treat with those things, so that it's no longer a taboo. Because the average young person, depending on what they have been inducted, or in terms of their induction, or what their belief is that if I share my feelings, and if I express myself and say, this is not what I want to study, or this is not what I want to do, it may be they don't have an avenue to vent. They can't do it at home. And so to me, that was very, very informative, good information for me to see how these matters can be addressed. I think that covers the core points that I am taking away. And I hope that, you know, those are things, because the session has been quite long and there are certain key things to be pointed or to be highlighted that we would like to take away from this session. And having said that, I would like again to say thank you to all, and thanks for the opportunity for sharing. And I hope, I know, not I hope, I know that this session was as informative to the participant as it has been for me. So thank you very much.